All right, welcome back to Lightbar design using SoundOff Central Lightbar. So we're going to start this episode, the final episode, with building and mapping matrices. I'm going to use matrix 1 to basically say if my slide is active and I step on the brake pedal, I want matrix 1 to trigger with those specific conditions and show my brake function to the rear. So by clicking on matrix 1, I'm going to go down my list here, find my brake function. Here it is, stop. And any module that was designated as a stop module when we did Lightbar setup in the previous episode is going to now trigger when this matrix goes active. But we have to define when this matrix goes active. So let's go over to the matrix setup screen. And what we're going to do is we're going to go into this list here and we're going to say, all right, let's find in the list, it's off the screen, but let's go to slide 3 is on. And I'm going to add another condition, and I'm going to say that my brake wire, whichever wire I've tied my brake input to, let's say it's this. Let's go to wire 6, brown white. So I have my brake wire tied to this brown white, and I just need to make sure that this says it's on and the brown white wire is on. And when I do that, this matrix will go active. So this matrix goes active, and any associated mappings that are part of that matrix will also go active at that point. All right, and again, we would have to make sure that we have stop configured as part of this light bar. So if I go back to my light bar setup that we started earlier, I don't have a rear facing, so nothing is going to happen with this light bar. But if I had designed let's just change the light bar, do a quick tiny build out here. If I were to go into functions here and say pick these two modules and these two modules here, and say that they are part of the stop function in red, now when that matrix goes active, these are the modules that are going to trigger. So that's basically how the matrices work. Speed sense is a little bit different. We have the ability to use speed sense to say, hey, if I get over a certain threshold, I want it to do something else. So pick your vehicle. Now, a lot of these vehicles don't show the current most, like they may not show 2021. Usually this is going to work just fine, even though it only goes up to 2020. They are the same chassis, so there's no reason to think they wouldn't work. Once you pick a vehicle, you can basically say, okay, what's it active between? So you can use this slider here to say, all right, I want to go maybe between, let's say between 20 and 50. I want this speed sense trigger to trigger mode 5 on my light bar. And maybe we've programmed mode 5 to be a more aggressive, faster pattern. And then we can go to speed sense 2. And let's do the same thing. We'll do the intercept utility, and we're going to go, say, 50 to 90. Actually, let's go 50 all the way up to the top. We're going to have that trigger mode 6. And we can get even more tricky. We can actually use these as conditions inside of a matrix. So we could say if slide 3 is on and my speed is above, the first trigger, so my speed gets between 20 and 50, it's now going to do the matrix instead of this. You have the ability to actually map both. I can map something to the speed, and I could say if I'm in slide 3 and I trigger the speed, I could have it do something totally different. So a lot of functionality there when it comes to I/O mapping. All right, so let's head over to the control simulator. So the control simulator works by basically sending on commands to our light bar. Now it's only going to send commands that we've uploaded. So right now I've got nothing mapped on my blue-white wire. And if I go down to my siren buttons, it's not showing anything mapped there. If I hit upload, it's now going to show different information. But I'm going to go over and double check a couple things. Let's go to the blue-white and let's just turn on mode 2 and all the front modules. And then we'll hit upload. All right, so now when I go to the control simulator and I hit the on button, it's now in the on state. And at this point, I can basically come down here, click on this, and it's going to turn on any functions that have been programmed specific to your light bar. Now, you do have to be connected to the light bar, and the light bar has to have power and ground, and the breakout box has to have power and ground. And then this will turn on for you, and you'll get flashing lights, and you're like, oh, cool, that looks good. Or, hey, I want to change something about that. I'm going to turn it back off. Let's go do this. We'll head back over to setup, maybe change a pattern or two, blah, blah, blah. Pretend we did that. Go back to control simulator, and we can turn it back on, or upload first, then turn it back on, and we could test that out again and see the difference. So it allows you to kind of make your program, do different things rather quickly. And you can also even trigger things like those matrices. If I wanted to trigger the matrix itself, you can scroll down here and trigger the matrix. All right, I'm going to go ahead and click turn all outputs off. So this is basically like a hard stop for anything that's active. I'll leave this off. And let's go into firmware and diagnostics. So depending on the light bar that you're plugged into, you might get different information, but for the most part, it's all the same. You have the ability to update firmware as soon as you plug into a breakout box. All right, so once you're plugged in, you can click this. It's going to go ahead and update all the firmware for you. It'll kind of give you progress for each step that it's doing. Some steps take longer than others. Some are really quick, and there's a couple that are, little long time. So this is one of those things, maybe click the update and give it a couple minutes, come back to the computer. It'll probably be done at that point. Now, you have the ability to update breakout boxes, and you have the ability to update Lightbar modules. If I hit update firmware, it's going to go ahead and update my firmware for me. It's just going to take me to whatever the latest firmware is for the breakout box. If I wanted to do Lightbar modules, I'd have to click on that. But before I do that, I want to show you that when we have the breakout box selected, we can say what version's actually on there. So I'm going to go ahead and click that, and it's telling me I've got 5.0206. If I hover over use current version, it's going to say, hey, what is the current version? And in this case, it's 5.03. So I would probably benefit from doing a firmware update. So I could just click on this and go through the firmware update process. We'll do that at the very end of the video. And then if I wanted to update the Lightbar modules, I can click on them, and it's going to basically go through and detect the modules. Now, it's going to start by detecting what it knows you have connected based on what we did on this screen here. So let's go back over to here, and it's going to tell me what all my firmware is. 103 across the board. Let's check what's current. We're at 103. I'm running 6-inch modules on my traffic controller. So I don't need to do a firmware update on these modules. They don't need it at all. But if I wanted to, I could just hit select all and then hit update firmware. Or if I wanted to just do a specific one, I could just select that one, go do a firmware update. Boom, that's all there is to it. It's really simple. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and finish this by speeding up the process of doing the update on the breakout box, so you can kind of see what it goes through, and I'll put a time elapsed at the bottom when it's all said and done. And that's it. That's basically how to program light bars using SoundOff Central Lightbar.